environmental influence that I want to spend more time talking about is socioeconomic status, or SES. The socio piece of socioeconomic status is your social status. So this consists of years of education and the prestige of your job, as well as the skill it requires. The economic piece of socioeconomic status is your income. So socioeconomic status is an index of a family or an individual's social position and economic well-being based on years of education, prestige and skill level of your job, and income. I'd like you guys to think a little bit about how SES might impact family functioning. So we just talked about different family influences. How do you think socioeconomic status, either very high or very low, might impact how a family functions? Well, one thing that we see is that SES is linked to a variety of different things. It's linked to timing of marriage and parenthood. It's linked to family size, values and expectations for children. So this one's kind of interesting. So what would you think that lower SES parents would emphasize when it comes to values and expectations for children compared to higher SES parents? What we see is that lower SES parents tend to emphasize more external characteristics, things like obedience, politeness, and cleanliness, whereas higher SES parents tend to emphasize more psychological traits like curiosity or happiness. And we see that these differences are reflected in family interactions. When you think about the reason for these differences, I'd like you guys to think about what kind of jobs does a lower SES parent have compared to a higher SES parent. I mean, if we just compare a blue-collar job to a white-collar job, if you're in a blue-collar type of job, what are you going to be praised for by your supervisor? You're probably going to be praised for having a neat and tidy area, for being on time to work, for listening to directions well and following through on those directions. Now take a white-collar worker. That white-collar worker, what would they be praised for by their supervisor? With a white-collar worker, it tends to be about how creative were you? How innovative were you? How much did you take initiative and explore and run with your ideas, right? And so you see these relationships between, in your work environment as a parent, influence that family, that parent-child interaction. So what we see is that higher levels of education and economic security, it is going to also contribute to higher SES parents' ability to devote more time, more energy, and more material resources to fostering their children's psychological characteristics. I mean, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, are you really going to be like, oh, let me spend some of this paycheck signing my child up for swimming classes or art classes or piano lessons, right? So higher SES parents, they literally have more resources, and they also probably aren't working as many hours necessarily as a lower SES parent. So we see that SES is also linked to parents' education and economic security. It's also interestingly linked to communication and discipline styles. So one example that we will talk about later on in the semester is a really foundational article on language development written by Hart and Risley. This is from 1992, so it's definitely dated, but it's very foundational. In this article, the researchers show that the amount of parenting per hour and the quality of verbal content associated with that parenting is strongly related to SES and the subsequent IQ of the child. However, what you guys will soon learn is that even though there's a relationship between parenting parenting style and SES. You guys, we've talked about this, that correlation does not imply causation. So it doesn't mean that just because you're lower SES means that you're going to have a child with a low IQ or you're going to parent poorly. I mean, part of the research is just getting that information out there. So in the Hart and Risley article, what they actually showed was, yes, there's a relationship between verbal content and SES, but if you account for the number of words that parents are saying to their children, that actually explains that relationship between verbal content and SES. So really, it's just a matter of lower SES parents weren't saying as many words to their children. And so what we see also is that lower and higher SES parents, they actually use the same number of like command kind of words, like or business talk, stop that, walk away from there, that's a no-no. It's just that higher SES parents also use more conversational talk. So when you think about the ratio between business talk and conversational talk, it's more balanced with higher SES parents than it was with the lower SES parents. So this is part of the reason why we see SES is linked to this communication style. And it's also going to be linked to investment in children's cognitive development. Part of the problem is if you don't have the resources or the money or the time to invest in children's cognitive development, then there will for sure be differences between lower SES and higher SES parents. On the flip side of things, there's also some risks associated with affluence. So affluence is just this state of being very wealthy, of having a lot of money. What we see is that affluent parents who are in prestigious and high-paying occupations, they often fail to actually engage in family interaction and parenting that promote favorable development. So poorly adjusted, affluent young people report less emotional closeness with or supervision from their parents. We also see that affluent parents might sometimes have very excessive parental demands for achievement, and this can also lead to problems. In fact, several studies show that affluent teenagers are more likely than teenagers with low SES backgrounds to suffer from anxiety and depression.